Samsung, from rice trader to tech titan in 2024, Samsung is a $300 billion empire that touches every aspect of modern life. But just 50 years ago, this Korean company was known for one thing: cheap, low-quality electronics that nobody wanted to buy. This is the story of how a rice trading company founded by a man with an elementary school education built one of the most powerful technology empires in human history, survived a devastating family scandal, and redefined what it means to innovate at scale. By the end of this story, you'll understand the three strategies that separated Samsung from every other manufacturer, and why their success required them to nearly destroy their own reputation first. Let's go back to 1938. Lee Byung-chul was a 28-year-old entrepreneur in Japanese-occupied Korea. With just 30,000 won borrowed from his father, he started Samsung Trading Company in a small building in Taegu. The name Samsung meant 3 stars in Korean, representing something big, powerful, and everlasting. Most people thought it was just another local trading business that would never leave Korea. Instead, Lee did something that would change the world forever. For 30 years, Samsung traded rice, dried fish, and noodles across Korea. But Lee had a bigger vision. He wanted Samsung to be more than a trading company. He wanted it to touch every industry that mattered. By the 1960s, Samsung had expanded into textiles, insurance, securities, and retail. But it was still a regional player in a war-torn country that the world had forgotten. Then in 1969, Lee made the decision that would transform Samsung forever. He entered the electronics business, partnering with Japanese companies to manufacture televisions, refrigerators, and washing machines. But there was a problem. Samsung's electronics were terrible. Their first black and white televisions caught fire. Their washing machines broke down within months. Their refrigerators leaked and made strange noises. Made in Korea became synonymous with cheap and unreliable. Western consumers wouldn't touch Samsung products. Even Koreans preferred Japanese brands like Sony and Panasonic. Samsung was losing millions of dollars, and critics called Lee's electronics venture a foolish mistake. But instead of retreating, Lee made a radical decision. If Samsung was going to compete globally, they had to think like a global company. In 1974, Samsung acquired a 50% stake in a struggling semiconductor company. Most people thought this was insane. Korea barely had electricity in rural areas. Why were they making computer chips? Lee's son, Lee Kun-hee, had studied in Japan and America. He understood something his father was beginning to see. The future wouldn't be analog. It would be digital. Through the 1980s, Samsung invested billions in semiconductor manufacturing, while continuing to lose money on consumer electronics. They were essentially funding 2 massive failures at the same time. By 1987, Samsung was hemorrhaging cash. Their electronics were still considered inferior, and the semiconductor business was brutally competitive against American and Japanese giants. Then Lee Kun-hee became chairman after his father's death, and everything changed. In 1993, Lee Kun-hee gathered Samsung's top executives for a meeting that would become legendary in Korean business history. He told them something shocking: change everything except your wife and children. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. Lee Kun-hee ordered Samsung to destroy $50 million worth of defective phones and fax machines in a public bonfire. Employees were forced to watch their products burn. The message was clear: Samsung would no longer accept mediocrity. Lee implemented what he called the New Management Initiative. Samsung would spend whatever it took to build the best products in the world, not the cheapest. They'd poach top engineers from Sony, Motorola, and other tech giants. They invested $100 billion in research and development over the next decade. They built state-of-the-art factories that could manufacture products more precisely than their competitors. But the real transformation came in the early 2000s, when Samsung made a bet that would define the next 2 decades. While other companies were focused on making existing products cheaper, Samsung saw an opportunity in something completely new: smartphones. In 2009, Samsung launched the Galaxy series. The first Galaxy phone was underwhelming. It looked like an iPhone clone and ran a clunky version of Android. Apple's Steve Jobs was furious. He declared thermonuclear war on Samsung, filing dozens of lawsuits claiming Samsung had copied the iPhone's design. But Samsung did something brilliant. Instead of retreating, they used Apple's attacks as free marketing. Samsung's advertising campaign directly mocked iPhone users as sheep following trends. Their Galaxy S3 commercial showed people waiting in line for the next big thing while Samsung users walked by with features that wouldn't come to iPhone for years. The strategy worked. By 2012, Samsung had overtaken Apple as the world's largest smartphone manufacturer. They weren't just copying, they were innovating faster than anyone else. Samsung introduced larger screens when Apple insisted phones should be small. They added removable batteries when competitors sealed theirs shut. They pioneered wireless charging, stylus support, and waterproofing. Most importantly, Samsung had something Apple didn't. They made their own components. While Apple had to negotiate with suppliers for screens, processors, and memory, Samsung could manufacture everything in-house. This gave them unprecedented control over quality, cost, and innovation speed. By 2016, Samsung was selling over 300 million phones per year across every price segment. They had become the Android ecosystem's most important partner and Apple's most dangerous rival. But Samsung's success went far beyond smartphones. Their semiconductor division became the world's largest memory chip manufacturer, supplying components to Apple, Google, and every major tech company. Their display division created the screens for iPhones, iPads, and most premium TVs. Samsung had achieved something unprecedented. They were competing with their customers while also being essential to their success. Today, Samsung is everywhere. They make the chips in your iPhone, the screen you're watching this on, and probably several appliances in your home. They're the world's largest smartphone manufacturer, the largest memory chip producer, and the second largest semiconductor company. Samsung employs over 280,000 people across 74 countries. They spend over $20 billion annually on research and development, more than most countries' entire technology budgets. What started as a rice trading company became a technology empire that defines modern life. So what can you learn from Samsung's incredible transformation? There are 3 key lessons that apply to any business. Lesson 1. Embrace failure as fuel for reinvention. Samsung didn't try to hide from their reputation for poor quality. They burned it publicly and built something better. Sometimes you have to destroy your old identity to create a new one. Lesson 2. Control your supply chain, control your destiny. Samsung's ability to manufacture their own components gave them advantages their competitors couldn't match. Vertical integration isn't always right, but when it works, it's devastating. Lesson 3. Compete where your competitors can't follow. Samsung didn't just try to make better phones, they made phones for everyone, at every price point, with features others wouldn't risk. They turned diversity into their greatest strength. Today, Samsung continues to push boundaries with foldable phones, 8K displays, and quantum dot technology. They've proven that with enough determination and investment, any company can transform from follower to leader. Lee Byung-chul started with rice and dreams. His son turned those dreams into reality. Together, they built proof that vision, when combined with relentless execution and the courage to change everything, can literally reshape entire industries. The next time someone tells you that your market is too competitive or your competition too strong, remember, they said the same thing about Samsung.